Hey everyone, Matthew here from Redflower Coding, and today I'm bringing you episode number 4 of our Sudoku game dev tutorial series. Click the link in the description down below to find the full playlist if you haven't watched the other episodes, because this one on its own isn't going to be very helpful for you if you don't start from episode number 1. But in the previous video, we actually created our board using JavaScript, and as you can see, the board is here, but we can't select any tiles yet, or any of the numbers from our number container. We can select the text, but we're not actually selecting the tiles yet. So we'll be adding that today, and hopefully we'll also be verifying if the moves are correct or not. As you guys can see in our solution code over here, we can actually place our moves, place numbers on the board. That one I was just guessing, but that happened to be correct. And if it's incorrect, it flashes red just like that, and our lives remaining is ticked down. And then if the timer hits 0, the game ends. Hopefully we'll be adding all that stuff today. And let's hop into the code. So let me switch back to VS Code here. I will be using VS Code for probably all my tutorials. I've mentioned this a bunch of times already, but if you don't have VS Code, go and download it, or don't, and use your own editor if you want to. You don't have to use VS Code, but it might be easiest if you want to follow along with this tutorial. Right now we're editing the index.js file within our main directory. We have our HTML, JS, and CSS files right here. We already finished these two in the first two tutorials, and we started the index.js in the last tutorial, but we're going to continue where we left off. And the first thing that we're actually going to do is we're going to go back up to the very top of our file, and we're actually going to add some things that we chose to skip last time. So this is going to be inside of our onload function. Right over here. We had to do two things in the onload function. The first one was to run start game if the button is clicked. And then the next one is going to be to add event listener to each number in number container. Remember, the number container is our bank of numbers on the side over here. This is the number container. These are tiles. Definitely have that distinction. This is the board. I guess this is the board div that holds these tiles. And then this is the number container that also holds these tiles. They have the tile class, but they're a little bit different. But number container, board. Definitely let's keep that distinction. So let me go back to our code here. And we're going to add an event listener to each one of the pieces of the number container. So what we're going to start with is a for loop that's going to step through all of the children. So for let I is equal to 0, I is less than ID number container dot children, children, there you go, dot length, quick typo, I plus plus. Typing while recording is always so stressful. I always forget, like, make so many more mistakes while you're recording. So anyways, within this for loop, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say ID number container dot children I. So this is the current piece that we're accessing, one of the 9 different numbers, dot add event listener. Oh, I thought that would tab autofill. Dot add event listener, click, and then comma outside of the brackets. And then function. So we're going to create a new function that will run every time that tile is clicked. Let me scroll down just a bit here. There we are. Okay, so we're going to add a new event listener. The first thing that we're going to check for is if selecting is not disabled. Remember we had that Boolean variable disable select. So when the game ends, we don't want them to be able to select any new numbers. That's what that's going to be used for. Or if you wanted to implement a pause menu, you could, but we're not going to do that for the sake of the tutorial. You would enable, or you would make true disable select, and then they won't be able to select anything. But if disable select is false, then we want to be able to select stuff. So what we're going to say is if not disable select. So if it is not true, meaning that if it's false, so if it is false that selecting is disabled. Sorry if I'm just making that more confusing. Then we're going to do a bunch of stuff, and then we're going to say if number is already selected, because if you guys see really quick in our solution code over here, the way we select numbers, let's restart because that game's over, is we can select one at a time, and then whenever we select a new one, it deselects the other one, and then if it's already selected, it deselects it. So it's like a toggle, but we can only have one selected at a time. We can have one piece of the number container selected and one tile within the board selected. Same thing here. If we try and select multiple, it'll deselect the previous one. And then if we click the same one again, it deselects it. So it's like a toggle. I guess I should explain that before we get into here. And I keep alt-tabbing to the wrong window here. Whoops, I have another VS Code window up here with my solution code. Okay. So let's check and see if the number is already selected. So we're going to say if this dot class list dot contains selected, just like that. There we are. So if it's already selected, then we're going to remove the selection by saying this dot class list dot remove selected. And really quick, I should mention that you guys might be confused why I'm using the this keyword here. It's because it's within the add event listener. So when we run this function, this actually becomes the specific piece of the number container. It doesn't become like, sometimes this refers to the windows, sometimes it refers to something else. It's definitely confusing. JavaScript is really weird what exactly this is referring to. So you can always just console log, do a console log this if you want to check it while you're writing your code, just to make sure that you're not referring to like the wrong element, or a lot of times it just defaults to the window. But right now this is referring to that specific piece on the board. So it's referring to this one, or you get the point. Still not tabbing to the wrong window. Okay, so if it's already selected, then this dot class list dot remove selected, and then we're going to say selected num is equal to null, because we have each individual piece needs to be selected at a certain time with that highlight, but then also selected num is just our variable that we're going to use to store whichever one is selected at any given time. So it's really easy to access rather than stepping through every single one of them every time we want to check which one's selected. And that doesn't make as much sense with the number container, but with our board, when there's 81 of them, it's much easier to just have one placeholder. So that's, again, what we're going to be using selected num and selected tile for. You'll see more of that later. And then we're going to say else. So if it was not selected when we clicked it, if it was not already selected at the time of clicking, then we're going to first deselect all other numbers. So we're going to say for let I is equal to 0, I is less than 9, I plus plus. You could also say number container dot length, but we know it's always going to be 9. We could also replace this one with 9 if we really wanted to. Number container dot children dot length, sorry, not just dot number container dot length. You have to have that dot children in there. But this or 9 is the same thing because it's always going to be 9, so it doesn't really matter. And we're going to say id number container I dot class list dot remove selected. What this will do is it'll make sure that any of them are, if any of them were selected at the time of clicking this one, it'll deselect them so we don't have multiple selected at the same time, because that would be confusing. Then we're going to select it and update selected num variable. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to say this dot class list dot add selected, and then we're going to say selected num is equal to this. And then we're going to update move, which is a function that we're going to create later. That will be the function that will check and see if there's a piece of the number container and a tile selected. Then it will try and place that number in that tile, and if it's correct, it'll stay. If it's incorrect, it'll flash red. We'll make the update move function a little bit later. I'm still tapping to the wrong window. Wow, I cannot seem to get that right. But that is actually it for our event listeners up here. That's all we need. So those should be completely set up. So if I Control S to save and we go back here, we're in our tutorial code, and we create a new game, we should be able to select these soon. 1 second. Give me a minute to look this over. Okay, guys, so we had a few errors here. The first one was that we forgot to put .children down here in front of ID number container. We just had it like this, number container I, and this is trying to access a certain index within an array of something that is not an array. This is a div, so we have to put .children, and then that returns an array of all the children of this div element, and I will access a certain index there. And then we had a typo right here. We missed an S right there. So now if we save it and go back to Chrome, we are still going to get an error because we haven't actually made that update move function, so that's not defined. But as you guys can see, we can select all the different ones. It only selects one at a time, and if we click again, it'll deselect it. Just like that. Okay. That took longer than it should have, but now we're all squared away there. Let's scroll down in our code, and we're actually going to scroll significantly down our file. Start game is all going to remain the same. We already finished all that stuff. Start timer will remain the same. But if you guys remember, when we created this generate board function in the last video, we left something blank, and that was if the tile has a number that is supposed to go in its place, if that in the index or in the string that holds our kind of starting seed for the board, If it's a number, we're filling in that number, but if it's a dash, we're going to leave it blank. So what we said was if it's a number, fill in the number, but if it's a dash, and then we didn't actually fill that in yet. So else right here is on the other side of this if statement right here. If it is not equal to a dash, then do this, fill in the number. But if it is equal to a dash, then we're going to else and do a bunch of stuff right here. And we didn't add that yet. But what we'll be doing is we'll be adding an event listener to the tile to see if it's clicked, to highlight it, just like we did with the number container. So this is actually going to be fairly similar. The first thing we're going to do is we don't need a for loop because there's only one tile. Remember, we're already doing this 81 times for each tile. So we're going to say tile.add event listener. Oops. Click function, just like that, and then we're going to have a close or a semicolon right there. And let me scroll down to my code just a little bit here. This is going to be quite a long function. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say if selecting is not disabled, same as above. So if not disable select, because if disable select is true, then it is disabled. So if it is not true, if it's false, then that means that it is not disabled, which means we can select it. So if not disable select, then we're going to say if the tile is already selected. Again, this should look familiar, similar to what we just did above. If tile.classlist.contains selected, just like that, then we're going to remove the selection. Oops. Yeah, I really just cannot type today. Then we're going to say tile.classlist.remove selected. Yep, looks good. And selected tile. We spelled something wrong. Selected tile is equal to null, just like that. So again, selected tile is that variable that's going to hold whatever tile is selected, so we can access it in other places in our code. We're going to set that to null because now there are no tiles that are selected, so we have to clear that variable. And then we're going to have an else. So if it is not already selected, then we're going to first deselect all other tiles. So we're going to say for let I is equal to 0, I is less than 81, I plus plus. So move that semicolon back just so our code looks cleaner. Right there, so this will run 81 times for each tile. We're going to say QSA. Actually, hang on a second, give me one moment. Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, I see what I was doing here now. So what we could do here is this is 81 times, but we want to access each individual tile. So we're actually going to say QSA dot tile, and then I dot class list, and I'll explain this in a second. Dot remove selected. Get rid of that extra bracket there. Just like that. So remember, QSA is one of those abbreviation functions that we made in the previous video. QSA is just going to be short for query selector all, and it returns an array of all of the items that are picked by that selector. So by using the dot tile, we're accessing any element that has the tile class, which all 81 of our tiles within the board div have, and it'll return those in an array, and then we're stepping through the array with the let I. It runs 81 times, once for each tile, and then we're going to remove the selected class from each one, just like that. And then the last thing that we're going to do is after we deselect all of the other tiles, we're going to add selection and update variable. So we're going to say tile.classlist.add selected tile is equal to tile, and then update move again. So what this will do is it's adding the selected class to it, which will highlight it blue, and then we're going to set this current selected tile to be equal to tile, and we're going to call it update move function again that we'll be making in just a moment that will check for accuracy. And we can check this in our code over here now. If we create a new game and we try and select a tile, you can see we're still getting that error because update move isn't defined yet, but don't worry about that. If we select another one, it deselects the current one, and if we click the same one, it toggles it on and off. Just like that. So it looks like everything is working well. Alright guys, now it is time to make that update move function that we've referred to twice now. I'm going to put this below the generate board function and above these ones because clear previous, clear timeout, these aren't really going to be used anymore. They're just going to kind of have to sit there and do their job. So we're going to say function update move. Again, I try and order my functions roughly by the order that they will be called when our code actually executes. Not exactly the same order. It doesn't really matter how you can order them however you wanted, but it just helps me kind of keep track of everything. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to say if a tile and number is selected. We want to test for that, because if we don't already have a tile and a number selected, we're not going to do anything. If we go back to our solution code here, we can see if we only select a tile, nothing happens. If we only select a number, nothing happens. It's when we select both of them, then something actually happens. So we need to test for that. We're going to say if selected tile and selected num. Selected num right there. And what this is checking is if they are not null. If you don't put anything else around it, if you just put them in an if selector, it'll say is selected tile null. If it is null, return false, else return true. So it's going to return true if both of them are not null. Then we're going to say set the tile to the correct number is the first thing that we're going to do. So we're going to say selected tile dot text content is equal to selected num dot text content. So what this is going to do is whichever tile is selected, the text content of this tile will be set to the text content of this. So if we click this and this, we can see that it fills in. It's not going to make it red yet. It's not going to take it away. We'll do that later. But that's the next thing that we're going to do. And then after that, what we're going to have to do is we're going to say if the number matches the corresponding number in the solution key. So now we're going to say if check correct selected tile. Then we're going to do a bunch of stuff. And check correct is another function that we're going to make right now. We'll put it right below here. We're going to say function check correct, just like that. And then the parameter that it's going to take is going to be tile. This used to be a much longer function because, again, I used to actually check as I was going. You know, if you want to place a 4 in a tile, is there already a 4 in that row or in that column or in that group? And if not, return true. But I realized that then you can run into some errors down the road, because just because it's true at that time doesn't mean it'll be the correct solution, because every board only has like a certain set solution, or maybe a few solutions, but definitely not every single possible solution as you go along will be working for the end of the game, if that makes any sense. Sudoku is kind of a weird game when you think about it logically. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say set solution based on difficulty selection. We could have also done this earlier when we created the board. Either one, it's up to you guys. We're going to do it now. Let solution if document dot get element by ID. I don't know why I have that in there, because we have our abbreviation function. If ID diff1 dot checked solution is equal to easy1. And you know what? This is actually the exact same code from above. So we're going to scroll up here. If you guys remember, in our start game function, we have setting our difficulty right here. I'm going to control C this, then we're going to bring it down. Sorry, this is a lot of scrolling. I'm going to bring it back down to check correct, and I'm actually going to paste this in here. You guys don't have to do this, and then we're only going to have to change a few things. First, we're going to change board to solution, because we want to set our solution right here, not our board. Solution being the let that we just created up here. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to change these zeros to ones. So now what this is saying is if difficulty 1 is selected, then the solution is the solution string from the array of the easy solution. And same with medium and hard. If you watch the last tutorial, this is the same thing that we did up there, so hopefully that makes sense. The next thing we're going to say is we're going to say if tiles number is equal to solutions number. So if solution.char at tile.id is equal to tile.textContent, return true, else return false. So all this is going to do is if the specific character in our solution string right here matches the text content of the current tile, if it matches this one here, then we'll return true, else it'll be false. So that's all we're actually going to have for that check correct function, but we'll use that a few times throughout here, or maybe just once actually, probably just once. So we're going to say if check correct selected tile. We're back in our update move function up here. Let me scroll back up in my code really quick here. If check correct selected tile, the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to deselect the tiles, because if you noticed after we place one, it deselects all of them by default. You could choose to keep the number container selected if you wanted to, and maybe we actually did that. Let's see, this is deselecting the tiles. No, yeah, we're deselecting both of them. You could choose to keep the number container selected if you'd like. So you could just like rapid fire it. You could say like, I'm going to put a 5. Let me restart this, the game's over. I'm going to put a 5 here, and a 5 here, and a 5 here, and a 5, and you can just click all of them really quickly. But for us, it's going to deselect every time. These are both going to go white after that's done. So those are being deselected. So we're going to deselect the tiles first. We're going to say selected tile dot class list dot remove selected num dot class list dot remove selected, just like that. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to clear the selected variables as well, because we don't want those variables still holding our values that are not true anymore. Remember, these are just the variables that are going to hold whichever tile and whichever number is selected at any given time. We don't want them holding false numbers, because if they're not going to be selected when the user actually looks at the screen, then we don't want them selected in the code either. So we're going to set those to null. And then we're going to check if the number does not match the solution key. So this is going to be inside our else really quick here. There we are. Else disable selecting new numbers for 1 second. So what this is saying here is if the number is correct, we don't really have to do a lot. All we did is we updated the number up here. We updated the number, and then we removed the selections and prepared our game to make another selection and to try and place a different number. And we're all set. That's all we need to do. But there's more that we have to do if it's incorrect. So if it's incorrect, we're going to disable selecting numbers for 1 second, because while it's flashing red, we don't want them to be able to click new things, because it could lead to clicking the wrong thing on accident. And we want to make sure that they notice the number flashing red so that they see that it's incorrect. So disable selecting new numbers for 1 second. Let me scroll down on my code a little bit here. So we're going to say disable select is equal to true. Remember, if this is true, they're not able to select any numbers or tiles. Then we're going to make the tile turn red. Turn red. So we're going to say selected tile dot class list dot add incorrect. And if the tile has the incorrect class, I think this is down at the bottom of our code, it changes the color to red. Right there, as you guys can see. Whoops, I didn't mean to alt tab back there. We just got to switch tabs right there. Then we're going to run in 1 second. So we're going to say set timeout function, a new function, and then after the close bracket, we're going to put a comma and 1000, because it's going to wait 1000 milliseconds, and then it'll run this function. And we're actually going to put a lot of code within this function. Wow. Okay, so within this set timeout, the first thing that we're going to have is we're going to subtract the lives by 1. And remember, these are going to be ran after that 1 second. So if you guys can see really quick, when we get one incorrect, there's 1 second where it flashes red and then it goes away. So this is going to happen at the end of that 1 second. We're going to subtract lives by 1. So we're going to say lives minus minus, that'll subtract 1 right there. And then we're going to say if no lives left, end the game. So we're going to say if lives is equal to 0, end game, just like that. End game is a function that we're going to create later. Not going to worry about that yet. If lives is not equal to 0, then we're going to do some other stuff. So I guess we should actually put some brackets here. Let's just surround that end game with brackets right there. So then we can put our else here, just like that, and we can move our comment up to there. Oops. Spacing is a mess right now. There we go. Okay. So if lives are equal to 0, then we're going to run endgame. If lives are not equal to 0, we want to do a bunch of other stuff. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to update the lives text. Because just because we changed lives by 1, this actually isn't being shown on the board, because when we set this text content of the lives paragraph element to display this, that only did it at that one instance. It doesn't say, keep track of the lives variable, and every time it changes, update the paragraph element. It doesn't do that. That only happened once up earlier in our code. So we have to update it every time that we change lives, or we could put like a timer that'll constantly check it, but that's very overkill for what we're doing right here. So we can update the lives text by saying id lives dot text content is equal to lives remaining colon space. You want to make sure you have that space, because if we do plus lives and we don't have that space, it'll put it right in front and it looks kind of bad. So the space will make it look much better. And then we're going to re-enable selecting numbers and tiles. After that 1 second has passed, we're going to say disable select is equal to false, so it's no longer disabled. And then either way, after that 1 second passes, regardless of if lives are equal to 0 or not, we're going to restore tile color and remove selected from both. And the reason that disable select false is in here is this is saying that if the game does end, we're never disabling, or we're never setting disable select to false, which means that it will remain disabled. Sorry, that's kind of a double negative thing. So if the game ends, we're never going to set this to false, so it'll remain disabled, which means that after the game is over, they can't keep playing, because we don't want them to be able to keep playing after the game ends. So we're going to restore the tile color and remove selected from both by saying selected tile dot class list dot remove incorrect. That removes the red color. And then we're going to say selected tile dot class list dot remove selected and selected num dot class list dot remove selected, just like that. And then we're going to clear the tiles text and clear selected variables. Selected tile dot text content is equal to blank, a blank string right there, because if it's incorrect, we don't want that number saying on that tile. If we place an incorrect one here, you guys will see it flashes red really quick, and then it'll go back to being blank. So we have to clear that out. And then we're going to say selected tile is equal to null, because again, we don't want a false value in the code if to the user's eyes it looks like nothing is selected. Nothing should be selected. And we also have to clear that other one. Selected num is also equal to null, so we can clear both of those. Okay, we've made a lot of progress, and I think we're actually almost there. That's it for our update move function. Give me 1 second to check our code. Alright guys, the last thing that we need to do is make our end game function. We're almost there. So we're going to have this below update move. Right down here, we're going to say function end game. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to disable moves and stop the timer. So disable select is equal to true. That means that everything is disabled. And then we're going to say clear timeout timer. Remember, timer was where we stored our set interval function much earlier in our code right up here. The reason we stored this is so that way we could clear it out much later in our endgame function down here. Then we're going to say display win or loss message. So if lives are equal to 0 or time remaining is equal to 0, in either of those cases, that means that the user lost. If the lives are 0, then they lost because they made too many incorrect moves. If the timer is 0, that means they ran out of time. So in either of those cases, they lost the game. So we're going to say id lives dot text content is equal to you lost exclamation mark to make it dramatic. And then else, we're going to say id lives dot text content is equal to you won exclamation mark. More drama. And we're going to save that. So again, that's saying it's checking if the lives are 0 or time remaining is equal to 0, they lost, otherwise they won. And we're using the lives paragraph element here just because it's in a convenient spot already. There's no need to make a new one, in my opinion. You always could if you wanted to. But if we make 3 incorrect moves here, you can see lives is down to 2, lives is down to 1, and then you lost is right here. And this is actually your solution code. So I guess I should go in our current code that we're working on right now. As we can see, you lost is on the screen. There we are. Alright guys, so the last thing that we need to do is something that I actually forgot in my solution code, so I'm going to be live coding this myself. And that is that if we finish the game, we need to have some way to update saying that you won, instead of just waiting till the time runs out, which I'm pretty sure I had the you win message somehow. But I don't see where that is in the code, so maybe something happened to that. So we're going to be making that really quick, and then we'll be all done with our code. We don't need to worry about that thing where the timer kept getting below 0 and like showing really weird numbers, because it can't get below 0 now, because if it gets to 0, then the game ends. But what we're going to do is in our update move function, after we add a new move, or if we check it if it's correct or not, and it returns true. So if it is correct, then we're going to check and see if all of the tiles are correct, end the game. So check if board is completed, and we're going to do that by making a new function, and we're going to call it check done, just like that. And actually we're going to say if check done, end game. Just like that. Because if you guys remember with our end game function, I can get rid of the search. With the end game function, if this is called early before lives hit 0 and before time remaining hits 0, then it'll say you won. So all we have to do is call it, and as long as the time hasn't ran out yet and everything else, if the lives haven't hit 0 yet, then when we call end game here, then it'll show you won on the screen. So now we need to create the check done function. Let's go right down here. We're going to say function check done, just like that, and we're going to start with let tiles is equal to QSA dot tile. So this will check, this will return an array with every single tile inside of our board. It's going to create a new array, I guess, or no, not create it, but tiles will become an array of every tile. Then we're going to set a for loop. We're going to say for let I is equal to 0. By the way, if you guys are wondering why I don't use for each, it's confusing. I don't like it, and I don't like explaining it. Maybe in future videos I will, though. Let I is equal to 0. I is less than tiles.length I plus plus. And then we're going to say, this is going to step through all 81 of the tiles, and we're going to say if tile.textContent is equal to nothing, return false. Yeah, okay. And then if we get all the way to the end of this for loop and false has not been returned yet, then we'll return true. And that should work, I think. So what this is going to do is it's going to step through all of the tiles in our board, within that board div, every single tile. If any of them is still blank, the game is not over, so we're going to return false. And if they are all populated with a number, then it will get to the end of this for loop without returning false yet, because as soon as it returns false, it's going to stop running, and this function is over. So it will never get to the return true if one of them are blank. But if all of them have something in them, it'll return true. And we don't have to worry about checking if it's the correct number, because we're checking correct before this function is called. So the only way that check done will ever be called is if that tile is already correct. You can see this is within that check correct, within the bounds of that right there. So that should work. So hopefully our game will be completely done now, but I guess we have to test it. And if it's not done, then you're not going to be seeing this. So that means it is done. So click off if you'd like to, but I'm going to test it really quick. Give me a little bit to fill in our board. Hold on guys, we made one typo really quick. This is actually tiles I. Sorry about that. There we are. Now let's check and see if this is correct. I'm going to create a new game here. This is in our code that we've been working with for this whole series. I'm going to fill in the board. I'll be right back when it's done. Alright guys, our board is almost filled in. Oh gosh, I did a 3-minute one. I only have 50 seconds left. Oh no, good thing I have an answer key. 5, 6, 4, running this backwards. 3, 2, 3, 9, 2, 8. 3, 9, 2, 8, and we should be able to fill this in now. kind of on a time crunch here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. And we need a 1. Oh geez, we're barely gonna make this. And an 8. You won. Okay, finally. You guys don't even want to know how many times I had to do that, because I kept hitting the wrong numbers, then having to restart. But as you can see, our timer stopped. U1 is on the board. No error messages. Our game works. That is all for this tutorial. Geez, I really wanted to just move on to new tutorials after I started this one because it was kind of annoying. From now on, we will be doing just JavaScript and no more really HTML and CSS. That's not entirely true. Maybe we will in the future. But more JavaScript and like drawing on canvases and stuff because that's more fun, in my opinion. It probably is for you guys too. But I still hope you enjoyed this series. If you stuck through with the whole thing, definitely drop a comment down below. Subscribe if you want to see new videos, and comment what you want to see in future videos as well. Like the video if you enjoyed, and yeah, look forward to new videos. My next tutorial will definitely be a platformer series, as many people requested, because I made that Java platformer and never finished it, and I'm not going to go back to it because Java is dumb, and JavaScript is way better because it actually has real uses, unlike Java. For the most part, Java is kind of useless. I mean, not really. Minecraft is made in Java, but you know, most games aren't. So anyways, hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.